What happens when the world's most arrogant billionaires mistake the wrong woman for a helpless target? In a high-end restaurant, three entitled heirs mocked a quiet waitress in perfect French, thinking she couldn't understand a word. They were dead wrong, and her brutal revenge destroyed their elite dynasty overnight. The crystal chandeliers of Le Ciel, Manhattan's most fiercely guarded and unapologetically exclusive dining establishment, cast a warm golden glow over the evenings of obscenely wealthy patrons. Securing a table here required more than just a six-figure bank account. It demanded pedigree, devastating influence, and the right last name. For the staff, working at Le Ciel was akin to walking a tightrope over a pit of vipers. One spilled drop of a $50,000 vintage Bordeaux, one slightly mispronounced culinary term, and your career in the hospitality industry was permanently eradicated. Chloe stood by the heavy velvet drapes near the kitchen's swinging doors, her posture impeccably straight, her uniform a crisp, immaculate white blouse and a tailored black skirt. To the patrons of Le Ciel, she was completely invisible. She was the help, a necessary breathing apparatus meant to deliver beluga caviar and disappear before the scent of her middle-class existence could offend their delicate sensibilities. But Chloe Harrington was not who she appeared to be 10 years ago, before a hostile corporate takeover orchestrated by the ruthless Kensington family had completely decimated her father's European logistics empire. Her last name had been Delacroix. She had spent her childhood running through the manicured gardens of an estate in Monaco, attending the prestigious Institut Les Roses in Switzerland, and learning the intricate unwritten rules of the global elite. When her father lost everything and subsequently passed away from the stress, Chloe and her mother had fled to the United States, adopting her mother's maiden name. She had spent a decade building a new life, blending into the background and quietly waiting. Tonight, the ghosts of her past walked right through the grand mahogany doors of the restaurant. A sudden suffocating hush fell over the dining room. Even the soft, melodic playing of the resident pianist seemed to falter for a fraction of a second. The maître d', a usually unflappable man named Henri, visibly paled as he rushed forward to greet the new arrivals. It was Preston Kensington, heir to the Kensington global real estate conglomerate. Flanking him were his two closest confidants and fellow generational wealth inheritors, Camilla DuPont, a shipping heiress with a reputation for publicly firing her personal assistants for breathing too loudly, and Tristan Rothschild Smythe, a notoriously arrogant tech fund baby who viewed anyone making under $1 million a year as a biological failure. They moved with a predatory, unhurried grace of people who knew they owned the building, the city, and the very air everyone else was breathing. Preston, wearing a bespoke Brioni suit that cost more than a Midwestern mortgage, didn't even look at Henri as he handed over his cashmere coat. "The private alcove, Henri, and ensure we aren't bothered by the common rabble tonight," Preston drawled, his voice carrying an unmistakable edge of boredom. "I don't want to see anyone at my table who doesn't look like they understand the menu." "Right away, Mr. Kensington." "Of course, it is an honor," Henri stammered, bowing slightly. He turned his desperate eyes toward the staff line. His gaze landed on Chloe. She was one of his best servers, quiet, fiercely intelligent, and capable of handling the most difficult divas the city had to offer. He gestured sharply for her to follow. As Chloe approached the secluded, dimly lit alcove overlooking the twinkling Manhattan skyline, her heart maintained a steady, chilling rhythm. She recognized Preston immediately. He had been a few years older than her at La Rosie, a bully who used his family's immense wealth to terrorize scholarship students. Camilla had been one of the older girls who once threw a glass of champagne in a maid's face at a charity gala in Paris, simply because the glass wasn't chilled enough. They were the absolute worst of the 1% hollow, cruel, and desperately entitled. Chloe stepped up to the table, her face a mask of polite, professional deference. "Good evening. Welcome to Le Ciel." My name is Chloe, and I will be taking care of you this evening. May I start you off with sparkling or still water?" Preston didn't even look up from his phone. He simply raised 2 fingers in the air, a dismissive flick of the wrist. Camilla, applying a coat of outrageously expensive lipstick while staring into a diamond-encrusted compact, sighed loudly. "Still, but make sure it's actually cold this time. Last week, the water here tasted like it was drawn from a tepid bar. Disgusting. Certainly, miss." "Dupont," Chloe said smoothly, keeping her voice even. Tristan finally looked at Chloe, his eyes scanning her up and down with undisguised contempt. He let out a small, mocking snort. "And bring the 2005 Dom Perignon, sweetie. Try not to shake it. I know holding something that costs more than your college tuition might make your hands tremble, but do your best." Preston chuckled, a dry, abrasive sound. "Don't overwhelm her, Tristan. You have to use smaller words with the staff here." Chloe merely nodded, her expression entirely neutral. "Right away, gentlemen, ma'am." She turned on her heel and walked toward the sommelier's station. Beneath her calm exterior, a cold, calculated fury was beginning to brew. They hadn't recognized her. To them, she was just another nameless, faceless servant to be degraded for their evening's entertainment. They had no idea that beneath her humble apron, she possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of their family's darkest, most heavily guarded corporate secrets her father had documented before his ruin. But she wasn't ready to strike just yet. She wanted to see exactly how far they would push it. The dinner service rapidly devolved into a masterclass in psychological torture. For 2 hours, Preston, Camilla, and Tristan treated Chloe less like a human being and more like a malfunctioning piece of machinery. They sent the beluga caviar back twice, claiming the temperature was off by a single degree. Camilla deliberately knocked her heavy silver fork onto the floor 3 separate times, forcing Chloe to kneel and retrieve it while Camilla openly critiqued the cheapness of Chloe's standard-issue orthopedic work shoes. "It's genuinely depressing," Camilla remarked loudly as Chloe knelt to pick up the fork for the 3rd time. "You'd think the restaurant would mandate better footwear. It completely ruins the aesthetic of the room having these peasants scuffing around." Chloe stood up, placing the soiled fork on her tray. "I apologize for any disruption to your evening, Ms. Dupont. I will bring a fresh set of silverware immediately." By the time the main course's dry-aged Wagyu beef adorned with edible gold leaf and white truffle shavings was served, the trio had consumed 3 bottles of the vintage Dom Perignon. The alcohol had stripped away whatever razor-thin veneer of societal decency they possessed. Assuming quite arrogantly that an American waitress in a Manhattan restaurant possessed the cultural and linguistic depth of a puddle, they decided to seamlessly switch their conversation to French. Not just any French, but the rapid, slang-heavy, aristocratic dialect exclusive to the elite boarding schools of Europe. It was their secret code, a way to be brutally cruel in plain sight. Chloe poured the 4th bottle of wine, her movements precise and practiced. "Regarde cette fille." "Look at this girl," Camilla sneered in flawless French, swirling the golden liquid in her glass. "Elle ressemble à un roi mouillé. Ses cheveux sont hollow bleus." "She looks like a wet rat. Her hair is terrible." Preston laughed loudly, leaning back in his velvet chair. "Je parie qu'elle vit dans un boîte en carton à Brooklyn." "I bet she lives in a cardboard box in Brooklyn," he replied in French. "Regarde ses mains, rouges et calluses. Mon chien a une meilleure hygiene. Look at her hands, red and calloused. My dog has better hygiene." Chloe continued, pouring, her hand steady, her face completely blank. She didn't miss a beat, though every syllable registered with crystal clarity in her mind. Tristan chimed in, a wicked, cruel grin spreading across his face. "Vous savez qui c'est les pleurs." "You know what would be funny?" he asked his friends in French. "Faisons pas pleurer avant le dessert." Je dirai aux rompela a volement mortgole. Elle sera renvoyée et probablement arrêtée ce soir. Si elle est hilarante, let's make her cry before dessert. I'll tell the manager she stole my Rolex watch. She'll be fired and probably arrested tonight. It would be hilarious. Camilla clapped her hands together in genuine delight. Oh, oui, de trop en sa misérable petite vie. C'est ça le clou de la soirée. Oh, yes! Let's destroy her miserable little life. It will be the highlight of the evening. They sat there completely openly plotting to ruin an innocent woman's life, have her falsely arrested, and destroy her livelihood, all for a fleeting moment of drunken amusement. They felt utterly invincible. They were the gods of the city, and Chloe was nothing but an insect waiting to be crushed beneath a designer heel. Preston looked directly at Chloe, switching back to heavily accented, condescending English. Hey, waitress, are you deaf? I need more truffle shaved on this meat. It tastes like garbage. Hurry up. Chloe slowly finished pouring the wine. She placed the bottle gently onto the silver coaster in the center of the table. She didn't rush to get the truffle shaver. She didn't apologize. Instead, she stood perfectly still, her posture shifting from subservient to commanding in a fraction of a second. She lifted her chin, locking eyes directly with Preston. The deferential, polite veil dropped entirely, revealing the sharp, calculated gaze of an apex predator. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, incredibly calm, and laced with a lethal, chilling authority. Si vous pensez, en une seconde que je vais vous laisser ruiner ma vie pour votre divertissement, Preston Kensington, vous êtes encore plus stupide que votre père. If you think for a single second that I will let you ruin my life for your entertainment, Preston Kensington, you are even more stupid than your father. The effect was instantaneous and absolute. The color drained from Preston's face so fast he looked as though he had been struck by a physical blow. Camilla gasped, her mouth falling open in a highly unladylike display of shock, a perfectly manicured hand flying to her throat. Tristan froze, his wineglass halting inches from his lips. Chloe didn't stop. She leaned forward slightly, resting her hands casually on the edge of their table, invading their space, completely violating the sacred boundary between server and elite patron. Her French was not merely adequate, it was the impeccable, refined dialect of the Monaco elite, sharper and more sophisticated than their own. Et toi, Camilla, and you, Camilla, Chloe continued, her eyes shifting to the trembling heiress. Avant de quitter mes trousers, tu devras peut-être traiter de la fraude fiscale de 3 millions de dollars que ta fondation dernière. J'ai vu les documents de transferox Milaskaiman. Before you criticize my shoes, perhaps you should worry about the $3 million tax fraud your charity foundation committed last year. I saw the Cayman Islands transfer documents. Camilla's eyes widened in sheer terror. The air in the alcove suddenly felt dangerously thin. Chloe finally turned her icy stare to Tristan, whose hand was now visibly shaking. Tu veux appeler la police pour un faux Rolex, Tristan? Faisal, mais quand la verront, je le parlerai de la cocaïne que tu as dans la poche intérieure gauche de ta veste brownie et de la façon dont tu as soudoyé le doyen de Harvard pour obtenir ton diplôme. You want to call the police over a fake Rolex, Tristan? Do it. But when they arrive, I will tell them about the cocaine you have in the left inner pocket of your Brioni jacket, and how you bribed the dean of Harvard to get your degree. The silence that followed was deafening. The three heirs, usually so loud, so abrasive and so powerful, were completely paralyzed, pinned to their seats by the terrifying realization that the invisible waitress holding the wine bottle wasn't just a fluent French speaker. She was someone holding the literal keys to their utter destruction. Preston swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. Who the hell are you? he whispered in English, his voice cracking, entirely devoid of its earlier arrogance. Chloe offered a small, terrifyingly polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. She picked up her serving tray, tucking it under her arm with aristocratic grace. "I'm the woman who is going to take everything from you," Chloe replied softly. "Enjoy your Wagyu. It will be the last peaceful meal you ever have." For what felt like an eternity, the only sound in the exclusive mahogany-paneled alcove of Le Ciel was the frantic, shallow breathing of Camilla Dupont. The thick, arrogant atmosphere that had surrounded the three heirs had been violently punctured, replaced by a suffocating, paralyzing dread. Preston Kensington, a man who had never been told no in his entire 32 years of existence, suddenly looked like a frightened, cornered animal. The expensive vintage wine sitting on the table, which they had used as a prop for their cruelty just moments before, now seemed like a mocking monument to their hubris. "You're lying," Preston finally managed to choke out, his voice a desperate, gravelly whisper. He gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles turning stark white. "You're just a nobody, a pathetic waitress. You don't have anything on my family. My father would crush you before you even made a phone call." Chloe paused, turning back slightly. The warm, ambient light of the chandelier caught the sudden, dangerous glint in her eyes. "Your father, Richard Kensington, is currently boarding his private Gulfstream at Teterboro Airport, attempting to flee to Dubai. Unfortunately for him, the Federal Bureau of Investigation received a highly detailed, heavily encrypted dossier 45 minutes ago. They are waiting for him on the tarmac." Preston's phone, resting face up on the pristine white tablecloth, suddenly vibrated. The screen lit up with the caller ID Garrison Heirs, Chief Legal Counsel. Preston stared at the glowing screen as if it were a live grenade. He reached for it with trembling fingers, pressing it to his ear. "Garrison, what is it?" Chloe didn't need to hear the other end of the line to know exactly what the frantic corporate lawyer was screaming. She watched with cold, clinical satisfaction as Preston's meticulously tanned face drained of all remaining color, shifting to a sickly, ashen gray. His jaw went slack, and the phone slowly slipped from his grasp, clattering loudly against the fine china plate in front of him. "They raided the headquarters," Preston mumbled, staring blankly at the wall, completely oblivious to his friends. "The SEC, the FBI. They have the offshore ledgers, they have everything." Tristan Rothschild's Smythe suddenly sprang up from his chair, knocking his crystal water goblet onto the floor, where it shattered into 100 glittering pieces. Panic, raw and unadulterated, contorted his features. "I'm leaving," Tristan stammered, frantically patting his jacket pockets. "I'm not getting caught up in your family's mess, Preston." "I'm out of here." "Sit down, Tristan," Chloe commanded. Her voice wasn't loud, but it possessed a terrifying gravity that rooted the young tech heir to the floor. "If you try to walk out of those front doors," the two plainclothes officers sitting at table 4, the ones who have been enjoying the duck confit while keeping an eye on your left pocket, will tackle you to the marble floor. "Do you really want to be handcuffed in front of the mayor, who is dining just 3 tables away?" Tristan's eyes darted toward the main dining room. Through the sheer curtains of the alcove, he spotted 2 broad-shouldered men in tailored suits, calmly sipping espresso, their eyes locked directly on him. He collapsed back into his velvet chair, burying his face in his hands, letting out a pathetic, high-pitched whimper. Camilla, entirely broken by the rapid, brutal unraveling of her protected reality, began to hyperventilate. Tears streamed down her face, ruining her extravagant makeup and leaving dark, jagged streaks of mascara across her cheeks. "Please," Camilla sobbed, looking up at Chloe with a sudden, sickening display of sycophancy. "Please, I'll give you anything. My trust fund. I have millions in a private account. I can write you a check right now. Just don't tell them about the charity. My mother will disown me. I'll go to federal prison." Chloe looked down at the weeping heiress, feeling absolutely no pity. She remembered the countless employees Camilla had terrorized, the small businesses she had bankrupted for fun, and the sheer malice with which she had mocked a woman she deemed beneath her. "Your money is dirty, Camilla, and as of 10 minutes ago those accounts have been frozen by the Department of Justice," Chloe said smoothly. She stepped closer to the table, her presence completely dominating the space. "You three thought you were untouchable. You thought your wealth was a shield that allowed you to treat the rest of the world like a personal playground to burn down. You thought you could mock me, humiliate me, and destroy my life simply because I was wearing an apron." Preston looked up, his eyes bloodshot, a mixture of rage and sheer terror swimming in his pupils. "Who are you?" he demanded again, his voice cracking violently. "Nobody has this kind of access. Nobody." "Who the hell are you working for?" "I don't work for anyone, Preston." "But I do have a memory," Chloe replied, her tone dropping an octave, becoming lethal and precise. 10 years ago, your father initiated a hostile legal takeover of a logistics conglomerate in Monaco. He bribed regulators, forged signatures, and destroyed a brilliant man's life to steal his legacy. Natnan was my father. Preston's breath hitched. "Delacroix," he whispered, the realization hitting him with the force of a freight train. "You're the Delacroix girl." "My name is Chloe Delacroix," she stated, the name tasting like victory on her tongue after a decade of hiding it. "And I have spent every single day of the last 10 years watching you, learning your networks, mapping your offshore accounts, and waiting for the perfect moment to pull the linchpin. You handed it to me tonight on a silver platter." Before Preston could formulate a response, the heavy mahogany doors of the restaurant burst open. The subtle, refined music of the pianist abruptly stopped. A squad of uniformed NYPD officers, flanked by federal agents in windbreakers, marched into the dining room. The elite patrons of Le Ciel gasped in horror as the agents bypassed the host stand and headed straight for the private alcove. Chloe smoothly stepped aside, blending seamlessly back into the shadows of the velvet drapes as the agents swarmed the table. Preston Kensington, Camilla DuPont, Tristan Rothschild Smythe, the lead agent barked, flashing a gold badge. "You are all under arrest." The morning after the arrests at Le Ciel, the sun rose over a Manhattan that had fundamentally shifted. The financial world woke up to a seismic shockwave that dominated every major news network, newspaper, and social media platform across the globe. The front page of the Wall Street Journal featured a massive, glaring headline: "Kensington Empire crumblers, federal raids, massive federal raids, massive fares, and the here in handscuffs." Beside it was a high-definition photograph of Preston Kensington, stripped of his bespoke Brioni suit, wearing a bright orange holding cell jumpsuit, looking utterly terrified as he was led out of a federal courthouse. The collateral damage was instantaneous and catastrophic. When the New York Stock Exchange opened at 9:30 a.m., Kensington global real estate plummeted into a devastating freefall. Investors panicked, dumping their shares at a record pace as the sheer magnitude of Richard Kensington's embezzlement, bribery, and market manipulation became public knowledge. Within 48 hours, a conglomerate worth billions was reduced to toxic waste. The Kensington family's assets were entirely seized by the federal government, their mansions padlocked, their yachts grounded, and their legacy obliterated. Tristan Rothschild Smythe fared no better. The police had indeed found 3 grams of illicit substances in his designer jacket, precisely where Chloe had said it would be, but that was merely the appetizer. The subsequent investigation into his background, fueled by the anonymously leaked dossier, revealed a massive paper trail of bribes his family had paid to Ivy League officials. Tristan was expelled, socially exiled, and facing mandatory prison time. His tech fund board, desperate to distance themselves from the radioactive scandal, voted unanimously to oust him by noon the next day. Camilla Dupont's horrific downfall became the obsession of the tabloids. The shipping heiress was publicly exposed for funneling millions of dollars of charitable donations meant for underprivileged children directly into her own private accounts in the Cayman Islands to fund her extravagant lifestyle. Her own mother, Eleanor Dupont, released a scathing public statement disowning Camilla entirely, attempting to salvage whatever scraps of the family name remained. Camilla was last seen weeping hysterically outside a Manhattan precinct, hiding her face behind a cheap plastic folder, her designer shoes nowhere to be seen. Amidst the smoking ruins of three powerful dynasties, Chloe Delacroix sat in a sunlit high-rise office overlooking Central Park. She was no longer wearing the crisp, immaculate white blouse of a subservient waitress. Instead, she wore a sharply tailored, midnight blue designer suit, exuding an aura of quiet, terrifying power. Across from her sat her lead attorney, a brilliant cutthroat lawyer who had helped her meticulously organize the data drop. The SEC whistleblower bounty has officially cleared, Miss Delacroix, the attorney said, sliding a sleek leather folder across the glass desk. Given the sheer scale of the Kensington fraud and the amount of stolen funds recovered by the government, your percentage is unprecedented. You are, as of this morning, a billionaire. Chloe opened the folder, her eyes scanning the official documents. The numbers were staggering, but they didn't bring a smile to her face. They brought peace. It was the exact amount her father had lost, returned to her with interest. And the Delacroix estate in Monaco? Chloe asked, her voice calm and measured. The bank accepted your outright purchase offer an hour ago, the attorney confirmed with a respectful nod. The property is yours again. The Kensington holding company that seized it is currently being liquidated to pay off their victims. Chloe closed the folder and leaned back in her chair, looking out over the sprawling concrete jungle of New York City. The city that had once felt so intimidating, so hopelessly rigged in favor of the corrupt and the cruel, now looked entirely different. She thought back to that night at Le Ciel. She remembered the sneers, the mocking French, the absolute certainty those three heirs had that they were untouchable gods playing with the lives of mortals. They had underestimated the invisible girl. They had assumed that service equated to submission, that silence equated to stupidity. They had built their entire lives on a foundation of unearned privilege and ruthless exploitation, completely unaware that a ghost from their past was quietly inspecting the load-bearing walls of their empire. Holding a sledgehammer, Chloe stood up, walking toward the floor-to-ceiling window. She didn't feel the need to gloat. She didn't need to post her victory on the internet or dance on the graves of their reputations. True power, she had learned from her father, didn't need to shout to be heard. She poured herself a glass of sparkling water, perfectly chilled, and took a slow, deliberate sip. She had reclaimed her name, avenged her family, and cleansed the elite echelons of three of its worst parasites. The wait was finally over. The waitress was gone. Chloe Delacroix had returned to claim her throne. What an absolute masterclass in revenge. Chloe proved that the most dangerous person in the room is never the loudest, but the one quietly taking notes. Never underestimate the people you think are invisible. They might just be holding the match to your empire. If you loved this story of karma and justice, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe for more incredible, jaw-dropping true revenge stories.